Hi, this is Truth Be Told Transformation, and I'm Bonnie Burkert, here to share tools for transformation to live your highest truth. So what might happen when we're actually true to what we believe in? My goal is to find higher consciousness for us and thus just feel lighter and happier. One of the ways that I personally find that is to get away from digital, but we want you, of course, to be listening to your podcast. But when you have time, is to get closer to the earth. So I've invited two women to talk to us today who live in New Mexico, which I feel is truly the land of enchantment. And they're going to talk to us about their center called Ardantane and their different practices that celebrate traditional ritual as well as attunement to planet Earth and how to live a sacred path. Welcome, Amber and Azrael.
Thank you.
Hi.
Very happy to be here.
It's great. So tell me a little bit about your center, Ardantane, in New Mexico. It is, you hold a lot of classes. I looked online and was sorry that I missed a lot of very interesting classes around Samhain, goddess tradition, and an observance of the changing of the seasons and how that can tap our warrior spirit to deal with that. So please share a little bit about some of the things that you teach.
Sure. Well, we began as a Wiccan school and retreat center, and we have expanded since then. We expanded that to include a neo-pagan population, which includes people like Druids and Norse religionists and so on. And then at some point we realized that what really matters is not the labels that we give ourselves or our spiritual traditions. What really matters is the values we share. And our major value, or one of them, is believing in the sacredness of nature and the importance of Mother Earth and staying connected with nature and the planet which sustains us. And so now we say that our center is for all those who honor the earth or hold the earth sacred. So that's our audience at this point. We're still mainly pagan-based in our beliefs and our practices. We do practice ritual. We do also celebrate the wheel of the year, the changing of the seasons. And we do a lot of spiritual work on the land, connecting more firmly with nature. I think if you are grounded in nature and open to the lessons that nature has to teach, then you've got a very good start on living a solid and spiritual life. So I'll pause there. And
yeah, no, that's great. And I definitely believe in that. So I'll ask you, would you like to give an example of a specific practice and what that might look like as far as connecting with earth energy?
Well, sure. Some of it is incredibly simple. The Japanese have a custom called forest bathing, where they go into a forest or a wild area and simply immerse themselves, immerse all their senses in nature, and be very still and quiet and absorb anything that comes to them. And that's really very similar to a practice that we have, which is going out on the land. And instead of focusing on a destination or a task, simply being with the earth and being with nature, opening all of our senses, focusing on different things like the energy patterns we feel around us, the light and how it changes, the movement of the air, the wind in the trees and bushes, the movement of insects or animals, thinking about the past and future of the space where we're sitting, considering the water flow, considering the forces that shape the land. So it's not quite just sitting passively. We attune our senses to different things in the environment around us. And then we may try to do a Zen-like meditation and simply be after that. I think if everyone were to do that, they would find themselves under considerably less stress in their lives. They would find themselves more centered, more serene, more clear in their minds. And when they return to their regular lives, they would find themselves more focused and capable in whatever they're doing. So that's an incredibly simple sort of practice. And yet most Americans don't do something like that. Most of us are too tied up with screen time or immediate tasks or appointments or whatever is in front of them in a very busy and loud society. We need to get away from that and recenter, find our authentic selves. And we can't do that if we're interacting with media, listening to commercials, watching screen. We can't stay in touch with who we are. It becomes all about the message that we're trying to process.
Oh, that's very good. I mean, I appreciate you that final point that you made about us feeling like we have to have that message, or maybe always the story, right? Being in a story that needs to be told, right? And so I really appreciate your description of the practice of listening to nature. And really, you had me right there, and makes me really want to join you in New Mexico. But I'm sure we can do that absolutely anywhere, and not just in the sacred lands of that area. So, I'd like to ask now, Amber, you're from the Chicago area originally, correct? Or you had been there at some point?
I was born in New York, but basically I grew up in the Chicago suburbs.
Oh, great. And Azrael, and where are you from originally?
I was born and raised in Los Alamos, New Mexico.
Okay, so you're from New Mexico. I just
yes,
was curious.
I came back here after college.
Okay, and where were you in school?
Oh, well, I got my undergraduate degree at Indiana University, and then I got a law degree from the Washington College of Law at the American University in Washington, D.C. Boy, that's a mouthful.
Well done.
And I have a master's in architecture from the University of Colorado at Denver.
It's
I came
interesting.
back after all of that.
Yeah, no, it's grand, and I appreciate that. I get, I'm. You all have a long path of your studies and your practice and in Wiccan traditions, and I was just curious what it was like for you as you moved from other parts of the country down to the beautiful Southwest, in terms of shifting your practice to more outdoor and experience with nature versus perhaps other ways of tuning in and study. Did you find a change based on your location?
A vast change. When I was first trained in Wicca, this was back in the 70s, we met in a basement. We had created a little temple room in the basement of a house in Chicago. We never went outside for ritual or practice. We stayed in a basement because that felt safe. And so the connection with nature was tenuous, to say the least. And when I moved from that environment, first to Wisconsin and then eventually to New Mexico, I found out that really the core of the practice is not the ceremonial magic that you might learn in a basement temple. It's not the books you might read. It's not performing a ritual with others indoors. I found that the key to my spirituality, at least, was outside in nature. And the rest, the community, the reading, the workshops, that's all gravy.
I can understand that. Azrael, would you like to comment on that yourself in your own experience?
Yes, I would. I've always been a bookworm. Give me the chance and I'll dive right into a book. And that took me through probably far too many years of schooling. And then when I came back to Los Alamos to live with my parents temporarily, I found in the local newspaper a full-page article about this thing called Wicca, and it had a picture of Amber and the high priest at the time. And I read that and I said, that's what I believe. That's what I believe. I like that. I like that. That's what I believe. How do I get in touch with these people? And once I had gone through the Wicca 101 class, which was a few weeks later, and got involved with the coven, it really took me outside, literally. We practiced out in the woods behind the house that was the coven stead. And just the simple fact of getting outside, walking across the street into the woods, allowed me to shed all of those daily cares and all that stuff and really get in touch with nature. Not exactly for the first time in my life, but certainly the most meaningful connection I'd ever had.
Fantastic. Well, one of the things I'd like to share with people, again, we've got, I lived in New York City for a long, long time. And one of the reasons I ended up leaving was because I was really nature starved. I figured out ways. I had a little park in my neighborhood and I was on a tree-lined street, thank goodness. And people would always say, well, what about Central Park? And it was far. It was far to get to it, and I wanted more immediate access. But really, the point I want to make is that it's one of the things is it may not be about trees and birds and grass. It can be about the sky, right? I mean, isn't that so much of what we can observe on a daily basis? And within that, the changing light, the changing lunar cycles. So would that kind of fall under some of the Wicca 101?
Well, yes, it would. We try to time much of our practice according to the phases of the moon, as well as the changing of the seasons, the solar cycle. So as part of our basic training, we help people attune to the different cycles of energy as the moon changes. So that's important to us. We find that being in harmony with natural cycles of all kinds helps, it smooths the path through life. We're not constantly fighting the currents of energy that are all around us, that inundate us. We are, to some degree at least, flowing with them. And that becomes important. Not everyone understands energy flow very well, despite the fact that physics tells us that we're all composed of energy. Everything is composed of patterned energy, even solid things, people. But most people don't understand that energy or how to connect with it, how to direct it, how to swim with it when necessary. And because we're unaware of the ocean of energy that we swim in, we can't possibly use it to enhance our lives. So that's a big part of our training, is understanding that we are in an ocean of energy, and we better understand that and learn to work with it, work with all of nature, or frankly, our species will not survive. This is not just a matter of, isn't it nice to be out in the woods and calm down and release your stress? This is also about the survival of humanity, because we either get with nature and the energy cycles in nature, or eventually we die.
I mean, one of the things that I did want to talk to you about, I feel very strongly the same way, and thank you for saying that and sharing that. It's important for my audience, my listenership, to be attuned to that, because really the purpose I wish to convey is, again, higher consciousness. And what are we doing with that higher consciousness, but trying to live in a better way on our planet? So I appreciate that, and really will add that to the sacredness of, the sacred living that we want to share with people, right? And how to approach that. So, Azriel, please give me, I'd love some comments from you on that as well as you, because it sounds like you've come to the practice, the two of you have come to the practice from different places. And so what's an example of how you attune to that and what you'd like to share with people for living in touch with nature?
Okay, well, one of the things that I do and Amber does almost every single day is we do look up at the sky, as you were talking about just a few moments ago. And looking up at the sky, we watch the patterns of the clouds. And for us, that is the goddess painting with light and moisture. The clouds shifts every day. She never does anything quite the same way. It's like a perfect watercolor that changes absolutely minute by minute. And watching a spectacular sunset, you can just feel the joy of the goddess shining through with the light and the oranges and yellows and purples and reds and pinks. And oh my goodness, it's all over there. In addition to that, one of the things that I found was I really, really enjoy going out at night and looking up at the stars. We live in a place where there's very little light pollution, and we can see thousands of stars here at Ardantane. And that actually led me to doing a ritual once, working with the goddess Nuit, sometimes called Newt, sometimes called Nut. Nobody knows exactly how the ancient Egyptians pronounce the name of the goddess of the nighttime sky.
How do you pronounce? Can you spell that if you were to ever see that in reading?
N-U-I-T or N-U-T.
Okay, thank you.
Just like the French Nuit.
Nuit, right?
Nuit.
Yeah.
Yes. Or Nut, N-U-T.
Okay.
And like I said, we don't know how the ancient Egyptians pronounced that. And as a result of that one ritual, working with her, she became my own personal patron goddess. And I have felt close to her and in touch with her ever since then. And the main thing that she gives me is a look at the really big picture, the really big picture. Because you cannot look up at the nighttime sky in a place where there's no light pollution and think of yourself as big. I'm a tiny little speck, and she can see huge, vast distances, both physically and through time. And that has been one of the great gifts I've been given doing this work.
Oh, that's incredible.
That leads me to another thought, which is one of the things we teach is magic, which of course is not stage magic or entertainment. It's the real deal. One definition of magic is the change of consciousness at will. Now think about that for a moment. Choosing to change your own consciousness. And I think that's what spiritual growth is all about, really, is learning to be conscious in new ways. And imagine being up in the night sky somewhere where the earth itself is a tiny speck, and the perspective that gives Azriel and others. Or imagine being down on a microscopic level, burrowing into a forest floor and finding the mycelium down there that allows trees to communicate with one another. Imagine being able to put your consciousness into the past or the future, or wholly and completely into this instant, this moment. Imagine being able to see and understand things from the perspective of another person, or from the perspective of a hawk, or a bear, or a dog. Changing consciousness is really important. I think most people, unfortunately, have a reactive consciousness. Whatever's happening around them is what they respond to. Seldom do they pause and take charge of their own minds and their own emotions and say, all right, at this moment, I choose serenity, because from that place, I can do something helpful. Or at this moment, I choose focused action. Or at this moment, I choose to understand an issue, a political issue, from another's viewpoint. We don't take charge of our own brains. We allow them just to react to the sea of stimuli around us. And that's unfortunate. How can you be an authentic, autonomous person if you're not in charge of your own mind?
Powerful. Amber, that's really, really great. I mean, you bring up such valuable, it's so important, what we're talking about right now in the here and now. And, I have an example that I want to share. I'm bringing it back down to planet Earth and the here and now, but I was on a hike yesterday, and and Mark, who's working on the show with me here, was right there with me, and we climbed some rocks, and they were very steep, and we were, it was so fun to go up. But then when suddenly you look down and you had the fear of how I was going to get down, and my joy suddenly, I mean, there was so much joy just to run up, and I wasn't even really kind of thinking about it. And so the point I'd like to make with that is presence. And I think that, what you were talking about is reaction. And so, I mean, I was having a reaction to, I guess, maybe altitude, being up high. But it was an opportunity to, I'm going to use the word presence, to really ground. And I actually asked the earth, I asked the rocks, I asked the stone people to help me down. And I think there's some sacred play in that I want to share, and I got down just fine, but it was very. I had to change my mind. I had to definitely approach it from a different perspective, because I've never had a fear of heights, and suddenly yesterday I did, and I figured out a way. I think I've always heard people talk about the stone people and the sacredness, right? The bird has energy, certainly the sun, the wind. Well, I needed those stones to be my friends and not just let me roll down and slide down them willy-nilly. So, hey, I'm here to tell the tale. So obviously they were there for me. It was in a beautiful, beautiful park where we're going to be doing a stargazing event. So I love what you talked about with the night sky. And so those listeners that are in Southern California in the spring, I hope that you'll join us, because really there's nothing like that cosmic perspective, and we really need it, because we are way too immersed in the crazy of the here and now in our cities, in our country. So thank you both for reminding us what's important. Now, one of the programs I know that you have is called Sacred Living, right? This is a course?
Actually, it's one of the schools here at Ardantane.
Okay.
And
so, yeah, tell us a little more.
I am the dean of that school. So if anybody can tell you about it, I suppose I should be able to. One of the objective of Sacred Living is exactly what we've been talking about. It is to awaken in people a sense of the sacred and their sacredness within this sacred environment. And we do that through a number of techniques and workshops that didn't really fit in any of the other schools here at Ardantane. So we created the School of Sacred Living specifically to address some of those things. One of the courses that we have is called Beyond Gratitude, and it's based on a book that I am currently writing, and unfortunately have been writing for several years. One of these days I will actually get it finished. And it is a way of looking at your life by going beyond gratitude. And I won't talk a whole lot more about it. It starts with gratitude and goes around through release and create and give and receive and back to gratitude for what you have received. And it's just a whole different way of looking at your life and your world. And it is a way of recognizing the sacred within yourself and recognizing yourself as sacred.
And I should mention also that a lot of it's very practical information about how you live in harmony with the earth and nature. And just how do we eat? How do we work? How do we sleep? What are the processes, maybe the hacks, if you will, of living a life that is harmonious and balanced and has a constant flow of creative energy running through it? So a lot of it's pretty practical and down to earth.
Down to earth. I like that. There's your tagline right there.
Exactly. Living
That's
down
great.
to earth.
So you mentioned that's one of your schools. So would you like to talk about some of the others, please?
Oh, sure. I can talk about Ardantane all night. Probably our, I should
Biggest.
say, biggest, yeah. I was going to say most popular, but they're all popular. Our biggest school is the School of Magic and Witchcraft, because that's what we are very highly trained in and have been teaching for a very long time. So there's magic and witchcraft, there's sacred living, there is pagan spirituality, which is a broad look at the theology and cosmology and the gods and goddesses we work with.
And the practices.
Yeah, and the practices. And then the fourth school we have is pagan leadership. And we are in the process of converting that whole school into a clergy training program for anyone who's interested in becoming an earth-based member of the clergy, a nature-based priest or priestess or minister or pastor. But anyway, people who would like clergy training and center their spirituality in nature.
Oh, this is excellent. Those are all really, really exciting programs. I love hearing the idea of a nature-based clergy. I remember when I was a kid, they would, we would go to church and I would just want to be outside, and I explained, and I would explain it was Sunday, and I would explain to mom and dad that being out in nature, wherever we were, we lived in Austria, we lived in Iowa, I mean, different places. It didn't matter. Being outside, that was my church, and they understood that. They did. They did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we found a balance between the two. But as I think about it, they were pretty good about taking us on drives and picnics and hikes and things like that. That maybe we might not have made it to Sunday school on any given Sunday. So that's very interesting, and I will absolutely stay in contact with you to watch how that develops. So Can we talk a little bit about the pagan, did I get it correct, the pagan cosmology?
Well, we can talk about pagan cosmology. I'm not sure it's possible to talk a little
You're
about
right.
pagan cosmology.
All right, give me a highlight or two, because obviously we want people to be taking the class.
Well, okay, couple of highlights, and Azrael's got one to share, and then I've got another. Go ahead.
Okay. My initial thought is you can't talk about the pagan cosmology. There are many pagan cosmologies, plural, and trying to define it is like trying to define everybody who considers themselves either pagan or earth-based as a single person. It just doesn't work. That's my initial thought.
Okay.
Continue.
And that's a very true thought. Couple of my thoughts. Most pagans believe that reality exists on many, many levels, some of which we can sense, some of which we are immersed in, and some of which are beyond the range of our usual senses. So we talk about shamanic journeys to a deeper level. We talk about moving on the astral planes. We believe that there are, if you will, entities, spirits, creatures that live on other planes and don't necessarily interact with humanity, although they can sometimes. We are like frogs that have a limited visual range and can't see everything around them. The same is true of many animals. They can't see color, they can't see distance, they can't see detail. And humanity cannot see the whole range of reality that is around us. But one of the things we do, because of our beliefs about the universe, is try to understand as best we can what those other levels of reality are and how they might impinge on our consensual reality and how we can sometimes communicate with them. This includes communication with ancestors, with the departed, and so forth. So I think our cosmology, our universe, if you will, exists in such an expansive way that it's not nearly as limited as some people confine themselves to. And one other thing I'll mention is that most of us are sort of polytheists, sort of animists, believing that there is spirit in all things, sort of monotheists, because many of us believe that all the different gods and goddesses of history are aspects of one creative force that brought the universe forth. I am very candid about the fact that I don't know who the gods and goddesses are, but that doesn't stop me from working with them. I work with a number of gods and goddesses from different cultures. Are they psychological archetypes? Are they deified ancestors? Are they independent, sentient entities out there in the universe somewhere? Are they some combination of all of this? I don't know. But I do know that I can communicate with them and work with them, and it really enriches my life. So part of our cosmology, I guess, is to say that, no, we don't always know what's going on. We don't have a book that tells us exactly what the boundaries of reality are or what all the rules are for moral behavior. We don't have that. A lot of our cosmology is a great big question mark. And we like it that way. It gives us something to explore and discover. I'll pause there.
Azrael, would you like to add anything to that? That was really powerful, Amber. Thank you.
I thought that was perfect.
Oh, no, that was really great. My mind is kind of blown. So I'm going to pull it together and process what you said. And I'm going to do something that I haven't really done with other interviews, but I feel called to do it. And that is to talk to you about a few subjects that come up somewhat in my show, but definitely with our main show, Truth Be Told with Tony Sweet. And one of which is ufology, aliens, ancient civilizations. And so I would like to ask your perspective on those other worldly beings.
Okay, the weird stuff. Yeah. Well, first of all, I cannot speak for all Wiccans, all pagans, or certainly all nature-based religions. I can tell you what I think, which is mainly, I don't know. Okay. There's something out there in the sky, which we could call UFOs, or what's the other term?
UAP. UAP is one of the more recent terms. Yeah.
Yeah, the truth is out there. We can say that, but I don't know whether UFOs are aliens from other worlds in our universe, whether they're human time travelers, whether they're people from the parallel universes that we hear about in quantum mechanics, whether or what percentage of them are tricks of light or illusions or weather phenomena. I follow that stuff a little bit. Also, the Loch Ness Monster and Bigfoot and all kinds of fun stuff. I follow that some, but it's mainly out of curiosity and without any real sense that I know what's going on at all.
Yes.
It's just part of an amazing universe and another mystery that we await the solution for.
What do you think, Azrael? Any experiences, and what do you think's going on with people's interests and experiences?
Well, for me personally, I am not interested in that. I just have too many other things going on in my life that have captured my interest, and I just don't have space. My life is like a suitcase. You can only put so much in before you have to take something else out, or else it'll burst.
But if you know how, you can unzip the suitcase in a certain way and it expands.
And that's perfectly fine. And when somebody tells me something that I didn't know before, I unzip the suitcase a little bit and my world expands. But I have not been interested in the extraterrestrials or UFOs or anything. And every once in a while, I'll hear something that's kind of interesting. And usually it ends with, but we really don't know what we're talking about. So who knows? And I'm perfectly happy to live with, I don't know what they're talking about or I'm talking about, so I won't talk about it. So I'll be quiet.
And I can very, very much relate to both of what you said, and my path of study and spiritual practices would be very much aligned with your paths. And yet, it's interesting to talk to people in the know who are very spiritual and illuminated, and what their perspective is on it. So I appreciate you and a great point of view, very much so. Another thing I'd like to ask you about. I'm sorry. Did you want to have a further comment? Did you have a further comment on that?
Yes. It's not that I am totally against it or don't believe in it. I can give a parallel example. I know very little about Oriental art. I know it's there. I know it's beautiful, but I have no idea how it was created, when it started, all the different schools of Oriental art. It's just not in my consciousness. It's in other people's consciousness, and I'm very glad for that. Because this world needs all of the interests that every single one of us 8 billion people have. And mine just doesn't happen to be Oriental art or UFOs.
Oh, very, very well said. Okay, so speaking of consciousness, so let me ask you this one. What is your point of view on plant medicine?
Oh, well, that's been a part of our spiritual tradition, Wicca, forever.
Okay, yeah, sure.
A lot of our spiritual forebears were herbalists and into herbal medicine, and midwives, or what they called cunning men, that is, healers in rural societies. And that was the major form of medicine they had, apart from energy healing. So that is part of our tradition. And Wicca is just full of all kinds of healers of many alternative paths. And certainly herbalism is a huge part of that. And many of our people are adept in it. And the fact that we have, 380,000 modern drugs with unpronounceable names and huge price tags, that doesn't supersede natural forms of healing or traditional forms of healing like herbal medicine. And a lot of us will make teas or poultices or whatever using herbs even today. And many of us grow our own herbs to do that. So, yeah, we're all for it if it's done intelligently with training.
Azrael, you want to add to that at all?
Yes. When we lived in our previous house, I actually had an herb garden, and I used all of the herbs that I grew for either medicinal or food purposes. And then we moved out here to Ardantane, which has approximately an inch and a half of sand on top of miles of sandstone. And it's extremely alkaline. I mean, it is off the scales and charts alkaline. And to be able to garden here, one would have to do a lot of probably raised bed gardening with imported soil. And then there's the problem of moisture. We have a well that provides enough water for us, but it doesn't provide enough for a garden. And in June, particularly, we would have to water 4 times a day.
Wow.
This is just not the place to be an herbalist.
That's very interesting, right? It makes you see how the different regions developed their spiritual practices for sacred living, right? As they could. I mean, that's what we were obviously all much closer to nature at one time when we didn't have iPhones and so smartphones. We won't have to be specific to Apple. So it's a very interesting point of view to remind us that regionality has a lot to do with perhaps of focus and some of the traditions that developed country by country, region by region.
Yeah, which reminds me, speaking of regional differences, we just had a recent alert from the National Parks Service that if you are in the desert, we're in the high desert here, if you are in the desert, do not pick up random toads and lick them hoping to get high.
That made news here in LA. I just want you to know.
It's just absolutely crazy.
Well, so I was asking about plant medicine in that sort of psychotropic way, and I'm going to pull that back around to a point that I want to make, a question I want to make, but I wanted to ask you, I mean, about, so that's pretty funny about the poor toads.
Yes. Yes. One of the things that I neglected to mention is that, of course, the native peoples on these lands use the plants that grew here naturally. They did not import dirt or water unseasonably. They used the plants that were around them. We have been so busy building Ardantane that I have not been able to get into the local plant lore in order to use many of the plants. But again, it's the matter of the suitcase. That's just one too many things right now.
Well, all in good time, right? That's all part of why we have this practice, is to figure out how we can find the space for all that we need to know and share and ultimately share. So
exactly.
What I wanted to ask, again, with plant medicine, I was definitely kind of thinking about the practice of using that for higher consciousness. So I want to ask you, however, with your studies, and, I'm remiss in not mentioning your book. So I know, Amber, you wrote the book True Magic, for example. And one of the other books that I know you both wrote was called Candlemas. And so that's, again, about the seasonality. And we're probably not going to have time to get into the details. And maybe you'll come back and talk more specific about the Wheel of the Year. Certainly one of my favorite subjects. But since we're just kind of touching base on practice, right, and the practice of sacred living, I just like to ask, and I think I know the answer from seasoned spiritual leaders that you both are. But do we need those the tool of a sacred plant to get us to that higher realm in some of what you're describing? Or can we do that on our own through meditation, breath, and perhaps even that connection with nature that we've been talking about this whole time?
Okay, what I'm going to say next, I do not want to be taken wrong as any kind of disrespect or disparagement of the spiritual traditions that do use um,
Entheogens.
entheogens or psychotropic plant medicine, and so on. There are many traditions that have that going back for ages and are understand what they're doing, and it's a valuable part of their tradition. And I'm not one to judge that. I will say that in our particular tradition of Wicca, we have found so much to discover, such an endless amount of resources in our own minds and hearts that we have never felt drawn to use psychotropics or entheogens or anything like that. We haven't exhausted the resources of the mind in its natural state. So for us, those are unnecessary tools. Others find them extremely valuable, some Native American traditions, for example, and that is absolutely fine. Uh, we don't partake of that. We have enough without that.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. Azrael, some closing thoughts from you?
Uh, that was just what I was going to say.
Oh, no, it's really, really great. Well, I've really gotten so much out of this conversation, and so many of the points that you've made, so articulately made, could have taken us into any number of different topics of conversation. So I really look forward to exploring more about what both of you are doing. I know that I've seen that you do regular workshops online, and we've got the website there. Ardantane.org. For anybody that would like to sign, do you have a mailing list that we can sign up for? I know your Facebook page lists a lot of your events, and I applaud you for your work, and in a really unique way. And our planet needs that. And that would probably, if I had more time with you, I would probably ask you that question. Maybe you can give me your final thoughts. But is it working? I mean, do you feel that this reverence for our planet and how you're teaching that through your sacred living studies, how do you feel we're doing?
It's sort of like the little boy on the beach that saw hundreds of starfish cast up by the waves and went up to one at a time to toss them back in the water so they could survive. We do our bit. We make a difference to those individual starfish, that is, to the individual people that come and share with us. I don't know if we can expect more than that. I don't know what the future of the human species is. All I know is that we are doing what we're called to do, and it does make a difference in the lives of some individuals. And I can't say more than that.
No need. Thank you again. That is wonderful place to stop. Thank you both. Until the next time, we really appreciate you joining us, and everybody else, thank you for listening. This is Truth Be Told Transformation. I'm Bonnie, and with a new episode every week. Tony Sweet is on every Friday live if you'd like to join him at 3 p.m. Pacific, exploring the paranormal. And we've got Robert Hensley also on Mondays with a live show. We are here to open the mind. So we thank you for listening. Your ideas, your shares, your likes and your follows are super important to us. Until the next time, wishing you well.